There are 7 steps to having and increasing our faith. I'm going to put the verse and translation directly from the Greek in the description. That way you can follow along. We're going to talk about where it originates and how we get more faith, starting with where faith originates, and we will summarize in 7 easy-to-follow steps at the end. Romans 10:17. So this audience, by means of that, faith, moreover hearing, because of that which was spoken of Christ, end quote. This verse has 3 points. Preaching of the resurrected Christ results in audience. Audience results in faith. By means of that faith, they hear. Plain reading of the text. Faith comes from being audience to the preaching about the resurrected Christ. This is why preaching is heavily silenced by Satan. This is why Christian nations have freedom of speech. This is why social media silences Christians that preach. Satan silences the preaching because being audience to preaching results in faith. Our initial faith does not come from election, it does not come from predestination, and most certainly does not come from so-called regeneration. It comes from audience to the preaching of the resurrected Christ. Okay, so what then happens next, and how do we get more faith? We're going to start with what that faith does, and then how to get more afterwards. Ephesians 1:13 KJV. In whom ye also trusted, after that ye heard the word of truth, the gospel of your salvation, in whom also after that ye believed, ye were sealed with that Holy Spirit of promise. End quote. This verse has 4 points. Faith, in whom ye also trusted. 2. Healed ears, after that ye heard the word of truth, the gospel of your salvation. 3. Belief, in whom also after that ye believed. 4. Rebirth, ye were sealed with that Holy Spirit of promise. From a plain reading of the text, trust, faith in Yeshua Christ always comes first. Trust actually has a higher degree than faith because trust is faith plus evidence. This so-called regeneration doctrine is false, whether you interpret step 2 or 4 as this so-called regeneration. And this is because faith comes first from a plain reading of the text. But regeneration doctrine claims that step 2 or 4 somehow comes before step 1. Furthermore, regeneration comes from the Latin regeneratus. At the time that John Calvin wrote the doctrine, look up the definition of the prefix rege, meaning the king, and neratus, meaning not being told of. So when you combine the two, regeneratus, it meant at the time that Calvin wrote the Institutes, not being told of, the king, or regenerate in English. So what king would we not be told of? Revelation 19:16 ESV. On his robe and on his thigh, he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords, end quote. The Messiah is the king in the context of the doctrine. So let's plug in our king, Yeshua Christ, into the doctrine of regeneratus, and we get neratus, not being told of, Yeshua Christ, rege. We are now going to discuss the passage dealing with acquiring more faith after our salvation. Luke 17:5-10. The apostles said to Yahweh, increase our faith. And Yahweh said, if you had faith like a grain of mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, be uprooted and planted in the sea, and it would obey you. Will any one of you who has a servant plowing or keeping sheep say to him when he has come in from the field, come at once and recline at table? Will he not rather say to him, prepare supper for me and dress properly and serve me while I eat and drink? And afterward you will eat and drink. Does he thank the servant because he did what was commanded? So you also, when you have done all that you were commanded, say, we are unworthy servants, we have only done what was our duty. End quote. Notice how after the apostles ask the Messiah for faith, he immediately responds by telling them to have the faith of a mustard seed. All believers have this already, and non-believers have this before they ever receive the Holy Spirit, because faith comes from audience to the preaching of the resurrected Christ, like we discussed earlier. Then the Messiah goes on to tell a parable about the believers being servants to the Messiah. Our faith is increased by working for it as servants to our Messiah, and we should be grateful and believe that we are only doing our duty to God instead of patting ourselves on the back. Philippians 2:12-13. Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now, not only as in my presence, but also much more in my absence, work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure. End quote. The Apostle Paul agrees that we are to work out our salvation with fear and trembling, working for the good pleasure of God, because it is God that is working with us and in us. We work for the resurrected Christ unto the forgiveness and sanctification of sins. The 7 steps are here. 1. Preaching of the resurrected Christ results in audience. 2. That audience results in faith of a mustard seed. 3. That faith results in healed ears to hear. 4. Those healed ears to hear results in belief. 5. That belief results in rebirth in the Holy Spirit and salvation. 6. That rebirth makes us the Messiah's servants in servitude. 7. That servitude results with an increase in faith. We're now going to pray. Dear Creator Elohim, we are grateful that you have made salvation and faith simple, that we have faith from audience to the gospel of the resurrected Christ. And we ask that we be healed because of that faith, that we may hear and believe, and we ask that we receive the Holy Spirit in rebirth and salvation, that we are your servants in the Great Commission unto preaching the gospel of the resurrected Christ. And we ask that as a consequence of that servitude, that our faith will be increased and that we will be much greater healed in other aspects of our life. By the authority and power of Yahweh and as a command of Yeshua, that Ahiye Asir Ahiye shall bind it. Let it be faithfully done unto us. All right. Please remember to like, subscribe, share, and participate along in the comments down below, making your own comment and replying to other people's comments, and especially sharing this sermon with other Christians, because we need to start preaching about Christ. That's how we get people unto salvation. Okay? Please preach the gospel, and God bless.